Hey everyone. First time posting here, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. My name's Brian, I'm 35, and I've been married to my wife, Whitney, for 8 years. I'm an electrician, love my job, and I thought I had a pretty solid marriage. Thought being the key word here. Whitney teaches sociology at a nearby college. She's always been sharp, driven, and, how do I put it? She's got this way of making everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room when she talks to them. She's beautiful, smart, and until recently, I thought we were in a good place. But something feels off. And it's driving me crazy because I can't quite put my finger on it. It started about a month ago. Whitney's been acting strange, little things, you know. She's been on her phone a lot more, tilting the screen away from me when I walk by. At first, I didn't think much of it. She said she was busy with emails from students and faculty drama. Fine, fair enough. But then came the seminar. Whitney told me she needed to attend a 3-day sociology seminar in Cincinnati. I offered to come along, make a little trip out of it. Her reaction was sharp. Too sharp. She snapped, told me it was for work and I'd just be bored. I laughed it off, made some dumb joke about surprising her at the hotel with flowers, and she got mad. Like genuinely upset. That's when the first seed of doubt was planted. The day she left, she was almost too affectionate. You ever notice that? When someone feels guilty, they go out of their way to seem loving. She kissed me goodbye 3 times, told me she loved me, and then drove off without looking back. That first night, we talked on the phone. She sounded happy? Too happy. I joked about how wild a sociology seminar must be, and she quickly brushed me off, said she was tired and had to go. That's when I started noticing the pattern. See, there's this guy, Adam. He's her teaching assistant. She used to talk about him all the time, usually just little complaints about how he's always late or how he tries too hard to impress her. But lately, nothing. Radio silence. It's like he doesn't exist anymore. And yet, I can't shake this gut feeling that something's wrong. Maybe it's paranoia. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But I can't ignore how all these little puzzle pieces aren't fitting together anymore. Anyway, I'm sitting here alone tonight, staring at my phone, wondering if I'm losing my mind or if I'm about to uncover something I can't come back from, alright? So, I couldn't sleep last night. After I wrote my first post, I sat in the living room staring at the TV, but I wasn't watching anything. My brain was in overdrive, running through every little moment from the past few weeks, every sharp reply, every distant glance. It felt like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing. Around midnight, I picked up my phone and stared at Whitney's contact picture. I thought about calling her, just to hear her voice again, maybe catch something in her tone. But I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem needy or paranoid. Instead, I checked her social media. She's not super active, but she does post stories sometimes. Nothing there. Just an old picture from earlier in the week of her coffee mug and a sociology textbook. Then, against my better judgment, I checked Adam's profile. His account is private, but his profile picture, it's new. A selfie in what looks like a hotel room. The lighting, the decor, it gave me a weird feeling in my stomach. Could just be a coincidence, right? Hotels all kind of look the same. But that gut feeling, yeah, it wasn't going away. This morning, I texted Whitney. Just a casual, good morning. Hope your seminar's going well. Love you. She didn't reply until almost noon. Said she'd been in a workshop all morning and couldn't text. Fair enough. But her message was short, and there was none of her usual warmth. Here's where things started to really mess with my head. I was cleaning up the kitchen, trying to distract myself, when I noticed Whitney had left her iPad in the drawer by the dining table. She never takes it to these seminars. She says it's too bulky. I sat down, turned it on, and my hands were shaking. I didn't want to be that guy, you know? The snooping husband. But I also felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Her email was open. Lots of work stuff, student questions, faculty memos. But one email stood out. It was from Adam. Subject line: looking forward to this weekend. My heart was pounding as I clicked it open. The email itself wasn't overly suspicious. It was short and casual, talking about seminar topics, but the smiley face? That felt personal. Too familiar. And then I saw the email was dated 2 weeks ago. He was looking forward to this weekend. The same weekend Whitney had suddenly told me she'd be attending the seminar. I slammed the iPad shut and sat there with my head in my hands. Now what? Do I call her? Do I ask her directly? Or do I wait until she gets home and see how she acts in person? I feel like I'm stuck in this awful limbo, and every hour that passes feels heavier. I love her, you know. I love Whitney. But if she's lying to me, if she's with Adam right now, I don't know what I'll do. I need to figure out my next move, but for now, I'm just sitting here, staring at her iPad, wondering how the hell I ended up here, so I decided not to call her. Not yet. I needed to play it cool, keep my emotions in check. If I confronted her now, over the phone, she'd have time to come up with excuses. I'd get some polished version of the truth, and I'd be left second-guessing myself. Instead, I waited. Around 6 p.m., Whitney called me. I stared at her name on the screen for a solid 5 seconds before I picked up. "Hey babe," she said, way too cheerful. I forced myself to sound normal. "Hey, how's the seminar going?" "It's been great. Long day, though. We had this keynote speaker. He was amazing. I wish you could have heard him." I could hear background noise, voices, laughter, faint music. Not exactly the sounds of an academic seminar. "Where are you right now?" I asked casually. She hesitated. Just for a second, but it was there. Just grabbed dinner with some colleagues. We're at this little restaurant near the hotel." I swallowed hard. "Oh yeah. What's the name of the place?" Silence. Then a laugh, forced, nervous. "Brian, do you want me to text you the menu or something?" "Why are you grilling me?" "Grilling her?" I asked one question. "Nah, just curious," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You sound like you're having fun." "Yeah, it's been nice to unwind after such a long day. Anyway, I should go. I'll call you before bed, okay?" "Sure. Love you." "Love you too." And she hung up. But here's the thing. Whitney doesn't drink much, and she's not the type to hang out and laugh with colleagues late into the evening. It just didn't sit right. I went back to her iPad. This time, I checked her iMessage. Most of her texts were with me or her friends, but Adam's name was there, too. And those messages? Yeah, they told me a lot. There weren't any texts from this weekend. She probably deleted them. But older ones. They weren't flirty exactly, but they were comfortable. Little inside jokes. Comments about how he always brightened her day, and how he was so easy to talk to. One message from a few weeks back stuck out. "Can't wait for Cincinnati. It's going to be so nice to get away from everything for a bit." It hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't talking about getting away from students or her workload. She was talking about getting away from me. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my chest was caving in. I'm not a perfect husband, but I've always been there. I've supported her career, I've done my part around the house, I've made sure she felt loved. And now here I was, sitting alone in our living room, reading messages that made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out if I was going to confront her the second she walked through the door or if I was going to gather more proof first. One thing's for sure, I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. Something's happening, and I need to figure out how far it's gone. She comes home tomorrow evening. I've got about 24 hours to decide how I'm going to handle this. Do I act normal? Do I confront her immediately? Or do I wait and watch her squirm, see if she trips over her own lies? I don't know yet. But I do know one thing. I'm not letting this slide. All right, here we go. She's back. And let me tell you, it's like living with a stranger in my own home. Whitney got home around 7:30 p.m. last night. I heard her car pull into the driveway, and my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was sitting on the couch, trying to look casual, like I wasn't 2 seconds away from losing my mind. When she walked through the door, she had this bright, forced smile on her face. "Hey, babe. I missed you." She dropped her bag and walked over to hug me, but I stayed seated. She hesitated for a second before leaning down and kissing my cheek. Her perfume hit me, something floral but sharp. I don't know if it was new or if I was just hyper-aware of everything. "You look tired," I said. She laughed lightly. "Yeah, long drive. The seminar was so intense, I think my brain is fried." Her hair was perfect. Makeup perfect. Clothes wrinkled, but in that intentional way, like someone who freshened up before hitting the road. She looked too put together for someone who spent hours driving home after a 3-day seminar. I asked her about it casually. "Didn't hit too much traffic on the way back, huh?" She glanced at me quickly, then back at her bag. "Oh, I actually stopped for coffee halfway home. Needed the caffeine." Her story felt rehearsed. We had dinner together. Leftover pasta I heated up. She picked at her food, her phone face down on the table the entire time. She kept trying to talk about random stuff, the seminar topics, funny moments with her colleagues, how she wished I could have been there. But every time she looked at me, it felt like she was trying too hard. Like she was performing. After dinner, she said she was exhausted and went upstairs to take a shower. And here's where I made a mistake. I went through her suitcase. Look, I know it's a breach of trust or whatever, but trust feels like a joke at this point. Her suitcase was too neat. Clothes folded, toiletries packed perfectly. But her red blouse, the one I know she wore because she posted it in her story before she left, was shoved deep at the bottom. It smelled faintly like cologne. Not her perfume. Definitely not mine. My stomach turned. I closed the suitcase and sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the bathroom door while I listened to the sound of running water. My mind was racing. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she gave me a little smile. "You okay? You've been so quiet tonight." I forced a smile back. "Just tired, Wit. Long weekend without you." She sat next to me and rested her head on my shoulder. And I just froze. I couldn't relax. I couldn't stop picturing Adam. Couldn't stop imagining the worst possible scenarios. Eventually, she got up, kissed me goodnight, and crawled into bed. I told her I was going to stay up and watch TV for a bit, but really, I just needed to get out of that room. I sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, wondering what the hell I'm supposed to do next. I know something happened. I know. But I don't have concrete proof, just a bunch of red flags and a sinking feeling in my gut. So now I'm stuck in this awful space where every interaction feels fake, every smile feels hollow, and every "I love you" feels like a lie. I'm thinking about asking her directly, straight up looking her in the eye and saying, "Whitney, are you having an affair?" But if I do that, she might just deny it, and then what? I'll still be stuck here, questioning everything. Or do I dig deeper? Check her phone when she's asleep? I hate this. I hate what this is turning me into. But I can't let this go. I have to know. All right, here we go. I think I finally caught something. Last night, Whitney fell asleep before me. I stayed in the living room again, lights off, TV on mute. I could hear her soft breathing from upstairs. It was the only reason I felt brave enough to do what I did. I crept upstairs and grabbed her phone off the nightstand. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. Face ID wouldn't work while she was sleeping, and I didn't know her passcode. But then I remembered something. Her iPad was still downstairs. I grabbed it and opened up iMessage. It synced with her phone. At first, nothing jumped out. Just chats with her mom, a couple of coworkers, me. But then there was Adam. Here's the thing. Most of their texts were gone. I'm talking like a chunk of them. Deleted. But people forget something about iPads. They sometimes keep message previews even after the actual conversation is deleted. And there it was. A message from Adam that read, "I can't stop thinking about this weekend. Wish we didn't have to leave that hotel room." You looked so perfect in the morning light. I felt like someone punched me straight in the chest. It was just a preview. The actual message wasn't there anymore. But that one line told me everything I needed to know. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, just staring at the screen, the words repeating in my head. Wish we didn't have to leave that hotel room. I thought about storming upstairs, waking her up, shoving the iPad in her face, and demanding answers. But I didn't. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message, emailed it to myself, and deleted the email from her sent folder. I put the iPad back on the dining table, went upstairs, and lay next to her in bed. She rolled over in her sleep, her arm resting lightly on my chest. And I just stared at the ceiling, feeling like my entire marriage had just cracked open in front of me. This morning, Whitney woke up cheerful. She kissed me on the cheek, made coffee, and acted like everything was perfectly normal. She told me she was going to campus to catch up on some work. As she was grabbing her bag, I tested the waters. Hey, Whit, do you still talk to Adam much? Haven't heard you mention him in a while. Her hand froze on the strap of her bag for just a second. Just a second. Oh, not really. He's been busy with his own projects. Why? I shrugged. Just curious. You guys used to work pretty closely. She smiled, a little too quick, a little too forced. Yeah, well, things change. And then she left. I sat there with my coffee, staring out the window, knowing full well she was lying to my face. So now what? Do I confront her tonight? Show her the screenshot and let her scramble for excuses? Or do I wait, gather more evidence, make sure she can't gaslight me out of what I already know? I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe the woman I've loved for 8 years, the woman I've built a life with, is sneaking around with some 25-year-old teaching assistant. But I've got her now. I've got something. And I'm not letting this slide. I'm not an idiot, and I'm not going to let her make me feel like one. I've been sitting on this all day. The screenshot, her lies, the way she froze when I mentioned Adam, it's all replaying in my head on a loop. But I couldn't confront her yet. Not today. I wanted to, believe me. I wanted to walk into that kitchen this morning, hold up the screenshot, and watch her face fall. But something held me back. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's the tiny, stupid part of me that still hopes I'm wrong. Anyway, here's what happened next. Whitney came home around 5 p.m. She walked in with this casual smile, kissed me on the cheek, and asked what I wanted for dinner like everything was fine. We sat down to eat. Spaghetti, her favorite. She was chatting about some faculty meeting, something about budget cuts, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching her. Every gesture, every glance at her phone, every little laugh at her own jokes. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Whitney, I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. Can I ask you something? She froze for half a second before plastering on that polite smile of hers. Of course. What's up? I tried to sound casual. Do you remember when I offered to come with you to Cincinnati? Why were you so against it? Her eyes flicked down to her plate. Brian, we've been over this. It was work. You'd have been so bored sitting in a hotel all day. Would I? I asked, staring right at her. She looked up at me then, and for a split second, I saw something in her eyes. Panic, maybe guilt. But she covered it quickly. Brian, seriously? Are we doing this again? You're acting like I did something wrong. Her tone was sharp now, defensive. Did you? I asked softly. She pushed her plate away and sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but this isn't fair. I've been nothing but honest with you. I almost laughed at that. Honest. Right. But I didn't push further. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair and nodded. You're right. Sorry. I'm just stressed, I guess. She looked relieved, which pissed me off more than I can explain. She thought she'd gotten away with it. After dinner, she went upstairs to take a bath. I stayed downstairs, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I've got the screenshot. I've got the way she's been acting. And yet, I still don't have enough. If I confront her now, she'll cry, she'll twist it around, she'll say it was a misunderstanding. I need more. Something undeniable. So here's what I've decided. I'm going to follow her tomorrow. She told me she has a department lunch with some colleagues after her morning lecture. If Adam's there, or worse, if it's not a department lunch at all, I'll know. I hate that it's come to this. I hate what this is turning me into. But I can't live like this anymore, second-guessing every word she says, every glance she makes at her phone. Tomorrow, I'll know. One way or another, today was the day. I didn't sleep much last night, just lay there, staring at the ceiling while Whitney slept soundly beside me. I don't know how she does it. How she can just lie there, so peaceful, when I'm being eaten alive from the inside out. This morning, she got ready like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she'd be back by mid-afternoon after her department lunch, and walked out the door. As soon as I heard her car pull away, I grabbed my keys and followed her. Now, I'm no spy. I don't know how to tail someone without being obvious, so I hung back far enough to keep her in sight but not too close to raise suspicion. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Whitney didn't drive to campus. She didn't go anywhere near the college. Instead, she pulled into a little cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, but cozy enough for a private lunch. She parked, got out, and walked inside. And not 30 seconds later, Adam pulled up. I had to grip the steering wheel to stop myself from getting out of the car and confronting them right then and there. But I didn't. I stayed put and watched. They sat at a small table near the window. Whitney was smiling, leaning forward, hanging on his every word. Adam looked relaxed, confident, like he belonged there with my wife. At one point, he reached across the table and touched her hand. It was quick, subtle, but I saw it. And Whitney. She didn't pull away. I felt sick. My stomach was in knots, and my head was spinning. I wanted to burst into that cafe, flip their table, and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures of them through the window. They stayed there for about an hour, laughing, whispering, leaning in close like they were in their own little world. When they finally left, they walked to their cars, still chatting, still smiling. Before Adam got into his car, he leaned in and hugged her. It wasn't some quick, friendly hug. His hands lingered on her waist, and Whitney rested her head on his shoulder for a moment before pulling away. And then they both drove off in opposite directions. I followed Whitney back home. She walked in like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just spent her afternoon acting like someone else's girlfriend. "Hey, babe," she said casually. Lunch went longer than expected. The department chair wouldn't stop talking about next semester's curriculum. She was lying right to my face. I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Sounds exhausting," I said. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and went upstairs to change. And me? I just sat there, staring at the pictures on my phone. I have proof now. Maybe not absolute proof, but enough. Enough to confront her. Enough to make her admit it. But here's the thing, I'm scared. What if she doesn't admit it? What if she doubles down on the lies and tries to gaslight me into thinking I'm crazy? Or worse, what if she admits it? What if she looks me in the eye and tells me she's been with him? Either way, this marriage won't ever be the same. I'm going to confront her tonight. I can't keep living like this. Wish me luck. I couldn't wait any longer. After dinner, while Whitney was scrolling on her phone on the couch, I sat down across from her. "Whitney," I said, my voice low but firm. "Where were you today?" She blinked, confused, or pretending to be. "What do you mean?" "I told you, at lunch with the department." I pulled out my phone, opened the photos of her and Adam at the cafe, and turned the screen toward her. Her face went pale. She stared at the pictures, then at me. "Brian, it's not what it looks like." "Then tell me what it looks like, Whitney. Because it looks like you've been lying to me for weeks." She stammered, trying to find words, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she whispered, "I can explain." But I didn't want explanations. I wanted truth. "Are you having an affair with Adam?" I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't answer. She just stared at me, silent. And honestly, that silence said everything I needed to know. Whitney sat there, staring at me, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to speak but couldn't. I felt this hollow ache in my chest, like my heart had just dropped into my stomach. "Say something," I said quietly. She swallowed hard, then finally spoke. "Brian, it's not." "Don't tell me it's not what it looks like," I cut her off. "Because it looks exactly like what it is." Her face crumbled, and she started crying, quiet at first, then these sharp, shaky sobs. But I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she choked out. It just did." There it was. The truth. "How long, Whitney?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" I didn't go far. Just parked in some empty lot, staring at the dashboard while my mind raced. Every little moment from the past few weeks replayed in my head, her sharp responses, her phone always flipped over, the way she froze when I mentioned Adam. How did I not see it sooner? Or maybe I did see it, and I just didn't want to believe it. After about an hour, I went back home. The lights were still on, and through the window, I could see Whitney sitting on the couch, knees pulled up to her chest, eyes red and swollen. When I walked in, she flinched like she wasn't sure if I'd start yelling or pack a bag. "Are you leaving?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "Not yet." I sat across from her again, and for a long time, we just stared at each other in silence. "Do you love him?" I finally asked. She closed her eyes and shook her head. "No. No, Brian, I don't." "Then why, Whitney? Why would you do this to us?" She took a shaky breath. "I don't have a good answer. I felt disconnected from you. From myself. And Adam, he was just there. He made me feel seen." That word, seen, cut deep. Like I hadn't been seeing her this whole time. Like the 8 years we'd spent together weren't enough. "Did you ever think about me? About what this would do to me?" I asked. She started crying again, but I couldn't bring myself to feel bad for her. "Not this time. I never wanted to hurt you, Brian." "But you did, Whitney. You did. And you can't undo it." I got up and walked toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To bed. I can't talk about this anymore tonight." I closed the bedroom door behind me and locked it. Now I'm sitting here in the dark, typing this out while she's downstairs, probably crying into a throw pillow. I know this isn't over, not by a long shot. But right now, I just need to survive tonight. She hesitated, wiped her face with her sleeve, and whispered, "A few months. A few months." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her like I didn't even know who she was anymore. "You could have told me," I said, my voice shaking. "You could have come to me, told me you were unhappy, told me something. Instead, you lied to my face over and over again." She just kept crying, mumbling something about feeling lost, about Adam being there for her when she was confused and stressed. But all I could hear was the sound of my trust breaking into pieces. I got up, walked to the door, and grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "I need air," I said, my back to her. "I can't look at you right now." And then I walked out, leaving her sobbing on the couch. I drove around for hours, not even sure where I was going. I just needed to get away. From her, from the house, from everything. I don't know what comes next. But one thing's for sure, there's no going back to the way things were. I barely slept last night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Whitney and Adam in that cafe, leaning close, whispering, laughing. That hug in the parking lot. Her head on his shoulder. Around 6 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and went downstairs. Whitney was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring into space. Her eyes were red, her face pale. "Morning," I said, my voice flat. She looked up at me, her lip trembling like she was about to start crying again. "Brian, I'm so sorry." I held up my hand to stop her. Don't. Not right now. We sat in silence for a few minutes. The air was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. Do you want me to leave? She asked quietly. I stared at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to scream yes, to tell her to pack her bags and get out. But another part, the broken, tired part, couldn't say it. I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what I want right now. She nodded, clutching her coffee cup like it was the only thing holding her together. Are you still seeing him? I asked. No, she said quickly, shaking her head. It's over. I swear. It was over before you even found out. Why should I believe you? I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't have an answer for that. Eventually, I grabbed my keys and said I needed to get out for a while. I couldn't sit in that kitchen with her any longer. I drove around aimlessly again, ended up at a park, and sat on a bench watching people walk their dogs and jog by like it was just a normal day. Nothing feels normal anymore. I know I have choices to make, big ones. Do I stay? Do I leave? Do I even want to try to fix this? Whitney says she's sorry. She says it's over. But how do I trust her again? How do I sleep next to her without wondering if she's still thinking about him? I don't have answers yet. But I can feel something inside me hardening. This isn't the life I thought I'd have. And I don't know if we can ever come back from this. When I got home later that afternoon, Whitney was still sitting at the kitchen table, same spot, same cup of coffee, now cold, untouched. She looked up when I walked in, her face pale, her eyes hollow. Did you think about what you want to do? She asked softly. I tossed my keys on the counter and sat down across from her. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her. Her hair was messy, her sweatshirt hung loose on her shoulders, and she looked like she hadn't slept a minute. But you know what? I couldn't feel sorry for her. I wanted to, but I couldn't. Not after everything. I've thought about it all day, Whitney, I said slowly. And honestly, I still don't know. She nodded, staring down at her hands. I don't understand why. My voice cracked on the last word. Was I not enough? Did I do something? Did I miss something? What was it? Her lip quivered, and she let out a shaky breath. Brian, it wasn't you. It was me. I was selfish. I felt, I don't know, disconnected from everything. And Adam, he was just there. He made me feel. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't sit there and tell me he made you feel seen or special. You think I haven't been trying to make you feel loved? Respected? Appreciated? I have always been here, Whitney. Always. She broke down then, burying her face in her hands, sobbing like her body was splitting apart. And I just sat there, staring at her, feeling empty. After a long silence, I spoke again. You had a choice. You could have come to me. You could have told me you were unhappy, that you felt disconnected. We could have worked on it together. But instead, you made a choice to go to him. I know, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. I know, Brian. And I hate myself for it. We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. Do you want me to leave? I'll go stay with my sister for a while if that's what you need. I stared at her. Part of me wanted to say yes, to tell her to pack her things and get out. But another part, the part still clinging to the scraps of what we used to have, hesitated. No, I said finally. Not yet. But things can't go back to normal, Whitney. You need to understand that. I don't know if we'll ever get back to normal. She nodded slowly, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Do you still talk to him? I asked. No, she said immediately. I blocked him. Deleted his number. Everything. I pulled out my phone and handed it to her. Show me. Her hands shook as she typed in her passcode and pulled up her messages and call log. Adam's name wasn't there. But that doesn't mean much, does it? People delete things. People hide things. Did you sleep with him? I asked quietly, the question that had been gnawing at me since this all started. Whitney froze. Her eyes darted to mine, and she looked like she might faint. Yes, she whispered. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. My chest tightened, and I had to look away because if I didn't, I might have said something I'd regret forever. I stood up and walked out of the kitchen, my mind buzzing with static. I went upstairs, locked myself in our bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands. She slept with him. She slept with him. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just flirty texts or stolen glances. It was physical. How am I supposed to get past that? How do I ever look at her the same way again? An hour later, she knocked softly on the door. Brian. I didn't answer. Please let me in. I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I heard her slide down the door and start crying again. I just sat there, staring at nothing, while my wife cried on the other side of the door. Eventually, I heard her get up and walk away. I still haven't come out. It's been hours, and I'm just sitting here in the dark, replaying every detail of our relationship in my head. The laughter, the inside jokes, the little moments that made us us. Were they all fake? Did they mean anything to her? I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I can ever forgive her, or if I even want to try. But one thing is clear, whatever happens from here, we're not the same. And we never will be again. I didn't leave the bedroom all night. I heard Whitney moving around downstairs, the creak of the floorboards, the occasional sniffle. Eventually, the house went quiet. This morning, when I finally walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table again, staring into her coffee. She looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "Morning," she said softly. I didn't respond. I just poured myself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. We didn't talk. Not a word. Just sat there in silence, the clock ticking loud enough to feel like a hammer in my head. Finally, she whispered, "Do you hate me?" I let out a long breath and stared at the coffee in my mug. "I don't know." Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry this time. She just nodded and looked away. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and said, "I'm going out." "Okay," she said softly. I didn't tell her where I was going. I didn't even know myself. I just needed to be away from her, from the house, from everything. I'm sitting in my truck right now, parked in some random lot, staring at the steering wheel. I don't know if I'm strong enough to stay and try to fix this. But I also don't know if I'm ready to walk away from 8 years of marriage. All I know is that nothing feels real anymore. Nothing feels right. I sat in my truck for hours, watching people come and go from the little cafe across the street. Couples holding hands, friends laughing over coffee, just normal people living normal lives. And all I could think was how my life used to feel like that. Steady, simple, real. But now, it's like I'm stuck in this fog, and every step feels like it could send me off a cliff. Eventually, I drove to a park Whitney and I used to visit when we first started dating. It's quiet there, just a few benches scattered under tall trees. I sat down, staring out at the little pond where ducks were floating around without a care in the world. And for the first time since this all started, I let myself feel it. Really feel it. The betrayal. The humiliation. The anger. She slept with him. My wife. My Whitney. The woman I've built a life with, shared dreams with, laughed with. She gave a part of herself to another man. And now, here I am, sitting on this freezing bench, trying to decide if I'm supposed to just forgive that. I thought about the vows we made. The promises. And how easily she threw them away. But then, another thought hit me, a question I couldn't shake. Do I want to try to fix this? Because that's the reality, isn't it? If I choose to stay, it's not just about forgiving her, it's about rebuilding everything. Trust, respect, intimacy, it's all broken now. And I don't know if it can ever truly be repaired. Eventually, I went home. When I walked through the door, Whitney was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring blankly at the TV. She turned when she heard me come in. her eyes wide and hopeful. "Hey," she said softly, like she was afraid to speak too loud. I stood there for a moment, my keys still in my hand, and said, "We need to talk." She nodded quickly, sitting up straighter. Okay, let's talk." I sat down across from her, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. "I need to know something, Whitney," I said, my voice low but steady. "Are you done with him?" "Completely done." "Yes," she said immediately. "I swear, Brian. I blocked him. I haven't spoken to him since I came home from Cincinnati. I know you don't believe me, but it's the truth." "Why now? Why did it stop after that trip?" She hesitated. Because I realized what I was risking. What I was losing." I stared at her, trying to read her face, her body language. Was she lying again? Or was she telling the truth this time? "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't know if I can ever look at you and not see him." Tears welled up in her eyes. I know, Brian. But I love you. I love us. And I'm willing to do anything to fix this, to fix us." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. "Do you regret it?" I asked. Her face twisted with guilt, and she nodded slowly. "Every single second of it. I regret it so much, Brian." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, and buried my face in my hands. "I don't know if love is enough, Whitney," I said quietly. She didn't say anything. What could she say? After a long silence, I stood up. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a few days," I said. "I need space. I need time to think." She looked like I'd just punched her in the stomach, but she nodded. "Okay. I understand." I went upstairs, grabbed a duffel bag, and packed enough clothes for a few days. Whitney stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching me with tears streaming down her face. When I walked past her to the door, she reached out and grabbed my arm lightly. "Brian, please come back," she whispered. I couldn't look at her. I just pulled my arm free and walked out. I'm at my brother's place now. He doesn't know the full story yet, just that Whitney and I are having issues. I can't bring myself to say the words out loud yet. But here's where I am. I'm standing at a crossroads. I have to decide if I'm willing to try to rebuild this marriage or if I'm ready to let it go. Both roads feel impossible right now. But one thing's for sure, I can't stay in this in-between space forever. Something's gotta give. I've been at my brother Mark's place for 4 days now. 4 long, quiet, suffocating days. He's been great, honestly. Gave me space, didn't push me to talk until I was ready. But eventually, on the second night, I broke down and told him everything. He just sat there, listening, shaking his head occasionally. When I was done, he let out this long breath and said, "Man, I'm so sorry, Brian. No one deserves that. Especially not you." And hearing those words out loud, spoken by someone who's known me my whole life, broke me. We sat on his back porch, beers in hand, staring out at the empty yard. "What are you gonna do?" Mark asked. And I didn't have an answer. Because I didn't know, this morning, Whitney called me. I stared at her name on the screen for what felt like forever before I finally picked up. "Hey," I said flatly. "Hey," she said softly. How are you?" I didn't answer. "Brian, I know you need time. I know I've destroyed your trust, and I have no right to ask anything of you. But please just tell me if you're coming home. If you're coming back to me." Her voice cracked at the end, and I could hear her trying not to cry. "I don't know, Whitney," I said. "I honestly don't know." I hung up after that. And then I sat there, staring at the floor, my head in my hands, trying to figure out if I could ever see a version of my life where this didn't haunt me every single day. I packed my bag later that afternoon and drove back home. Not because I had a decision, but because I realized I couldn't make one sitting in my brother's guest room. When I walked through the door, Whitney was standing in the kitchen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, eyes puffy, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing one of my old sweatshirts. She froze when she saw me. "You came back." "For now," I said quietly. We sat down in the living room, facing each other on opposite couches. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I broke the silence. Whitney, if we're going to try, if it's not going to be easy, I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will again. And you need to understand that you're going to have to carry the weight of what you did for a long, long time. She nodded quickly, tears already streaming down her face. I know. I know, Brian. I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I stared at her for a long moment. If we do this, Whitney, it's going to be hard. Harder than anything we've ever done. And if I ever get the sense that you're lying to me again, even about something small, I'm done. That's it. No second chances. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back into the couch and closed my eyes for a moment, letting out a shaky breath. I'm staying for now, I said finally. But only because I need to see if this is even possible. I'm not promising anything more than that. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. It's been a week since I came back home. We started couples therapy, and Whitney's been seeing a counselor on her own. She gave me full access to her phone, emails, everything. She's been overly transparent, almost to the point of suffocation. And me? I'm trying. I'm trying to see her as Whitney again and not as the woman who betrayed me. But it's hard. So damn hard. Some nights, I sleep on the couch. Other nights, I lie next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I made the right choice. People say time heals all wounds, but I'm not so sure about that. Some wounds leave scars that never fully fade. But here's where I am. I'm trying. I'm giving it a shot, because for 8 years, Whitney was my world. And if there's even a chance, just a chance, that we can build something from these ashes, I owe it to myself to try. If it works, it works. And if it doesn't, at least I'll know I did everything I could. But one thing's for sure, things will never be the same. They can't be. This isn't a happy ending, or a sad one. It's just an ending. And whatever comes next is up to both of us.